Good evening, my sleepy traveler. Tonight, you're leaving behind phone notifications, traffic, deadlines, and every modern distraction you can think of. Instead, you're stepping quietly into a tiny English village nearly 800 years ago, a place where clocks don't exist. Mornings begin with birds instead of alarms. And your biggest concern is whether yesterday's fire managed to survive the cold night. So settle into your favorite blanket, fluff your pillow just a little, and let your breathing slow down. Before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing history stories like this, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe. And if you'd like, tell me where you're listening from. It's always wonderful to imagine people from every corner of the world drifting off together beneath the same story. Now, lower the lights, take one slow breath, and let yourself disappear into another century. The world around you is almost completely dark. Not the bright darkness of a modern bedroom filled with glowing electronics. This darkness feels older, thicker, the kind of darkness that belongs to a world without electricity. Your eyes slowly open, but at first they see almost nothing. Above you hangs a roof made from tightly packed bundles of straw. Tiny wooden beams cross overhead, each one shaped by an axe rather than a saw. The wood bends slightly with age, as though the cottage itself is stretching after another cold night. You remain still, not because you're afraid, simply because everything feels peaceful. Somewhere nearby, a tiny ember hidden beneath yesterday's ashes gives off the faintest orange glow. It isn't enough to light the room, but it's enough to remind you that warmth is still alive. Barely. The air is cool enough that every slow breath brushes gently across your face. You pull your ruffled blanket a little higher. It scratches your chin. Medieval blankets were much better at keeping people warm than they were at being comfortable. Luxury would have to wait another few hundred years. Outside, nothing seems awake, or at least that's what your sleepy mind believes. Then, a distant owl calls from somewhere beyond the village. Its voice rolls softly across empty fields before disappearing into silence again. Not long after, you hear something else. A sheep. Apparently, even sheep have opinions before sunrise. You smile to yourself. Some things never change. Animals have always believed that humans should wake up whenever they decide breakfast ought to happen. You slowly sit upright. The straw mattress beneath you shifts with a gentle rustling sound. It certainly isn't memory foam, but after walking miles every day and spending countless hours working outdoors, even a simple bed of straw feels surprisingly welcoming. Tiny particles of dust drift lazily through the darkness. The cottage smells faintly of dry grass, with smoke, damp earth, and yesterday's oat porridge. Oddly enough, it feels comforting. Modern homes smell like scented candles. This home smells like survival. For several peaceful moments, you simply listen. A wooden beam creaks quietly. Somewhere above your head, a sparrow tucked into the roof adjusts its tiny feet before settling again. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the thatched roof. It almost sounds like someone whispering. The village hasn't awakened yet. It's simply breathing, slowly, patiently, waiting for morning. You rub your hands together. Cold fingers were simply part of life here. Even inside the cottage, warmth escaped easily during the night. Stone, wood, mud walls. None of them cared very much whether your toes stayed warm. Fortunately, people became remarkably good at appreciating small victories, like surviving until breakfast. You glance toward the fireplace. Technically, it's still a fire, optimistically speaking. In reality, it's mostly a collection of sleepy ashes pretending to be useful. Still, hidden beneath them, tiny red embers continue glowing. You stand carefully. The packed earth floor feels cool beneath your feet. Every movement is slow. Nobody rushes in this hour. Rushing belongs to merchants in crowded cities. Villagers understand mornings differently. They unfold gently, like mist lifting from a field. You kneel beside the hearth. A small iron poker leans against the stones. Its handle feels cold in your hand. Carefully, you stir the ashes. Nothing happens. For a second, then a faint orange spark appears. Another, then another. The sleeping fire remembers itself. You smile. Congratulations. You've just completed what may have been one of medieval Europe's most satisfying morning achievements. Not burning the house down, just waking the fire. You feed it several tiny pieces of dry twigs left beside the hearth yesterday evening. They catch slowly, almost reluctantly, as if even the fire wishes it could sleep another hour. You lean closer and blow softly. The flames brighten. Orange light slowly spreads across the tiny cottage. Objects begin appearing from the darkness one by one. A wooden stool, a clay cooking pot, a simple table marked by years of knife cuts, a wicker basket filled with onions, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. Every object has a purpose. Nothing exists merely for decoration. In a medieval village, everything earns its place. The growing fire gently warms your face. Already the cottage feels more welcoming. Outside, another sound joins the morning. A rooster, far too enthusiastic. He crows once, waits proudly, then crows again, as though announcing the greatest sunrise in history. The sun, unfortunately, has not yet arrived. But no one had the heart to explain that to him. You chuckle quietly. Some traditions never disappear. Even after 800 years, roosters remain hilariously overconfident. You pull your cloak from a wooden peg. It's heavy, slightly rough, smells faintly of sheep, which makes perfect sense. At this point, it practically is sheep. You wrap it around your shoulders. Instantly you feel warmer. Not warm, just less cold, a meaningful improvement. You unlatch the wooden door very carefully. The hinges complain softly. Apparently, they also dislike mornings. The door opens. Cold air slips quietly inside. Outside, the village sleeps beneath a blanket of blue-gray darkness. Tiny cottages rest beside narrow dirt paths. Their thatched roofs shimmer faintly beneath countless stars. Thin ribbons of smoke drift lazily from only one or two chimneys. Someone else has already awakened, probably the village baker, or someone whose cow firmly believes sunrise is merely a suggestion. The earth smells damp after the long night. Nearby, droplets of dew cling to every blade of grass. Each one reflects the faint light of the stars. It almost feels as though the ground itself is sparkling. You step outside, your boots pressed gently into the cool soil. Somewhere beyond the cottages, a narrow stream flows quietly through the valley. Its steady sound mixes with distant wind moving across open farmland. No engines, no traffic, no buzzing electricity. Only nature and the slow rhythm of people whose lives rise and fall with the seasons. You inhale deeply. The air tastes incredibly fresh. Perhaps that's because it contains absolutely no car exhaust, a luxury medieval villagers enjoyed without ever realizing it. For several peaceful minutes, you simply stand, watching darkness slowly surrender to dawn. Tomorrow will bring hard work, fields, animals, water, firewood, repairs, endless chores. But none of that has arrived yet. Right now, the world belongs to silence. And in that silence, you feel strangely content. The sky is still wrapped in darkness, but something has changed. It isn't brighter, not exactly. Instead, the darkness feels softer. The stars that glittered confidently only a few moments ago now seem to fade one by one, quietly surrendering their places to a pale blue glow growing beyond the eastern hills. You pull your wool cloak tighter around your shoulders. The cold hasn't disappeared. If anything, dawn often feels colder than midnight. The night's warmth has completely escaped, and the earth patiently waits for the first sunlight to arrive. Tiny clouds of breath drift in front of your face. Each exhale hangs in the air for just a second before vanishing. You pause beside the doorway of your little cottage. The village is no longer asleep. It is stretching, not with loud voices or busy footsteps, with little sounds, gentle sounds. The sound of another wooden door opening somewhere across the lane. The quiet thump of someone placing a bucket onto the ground. A sleepy caw from a neighboring cottage. A dog shaking yesterday's straw from its fur. Life isn't beginning all at once. It arrives slowly. One family, one fire, one small chore at a time. You begin walking toward the center of the village. The narrow dirt path feels slightly damp beneath your boots. Rain fell 2 evenings ago, and the ground still remembers. To your left stands a tiny vegetable patch surrounded by a crooked wooden fence. Most of the plants have disappeared beneath the season, leaving only a few stubborn cabbages standing proudly against the cold. Apparently, medieval cabbages possessed extraordinary confidence. A tiny robin suddenly lands on one of the fence posts. It watches you carefully, tilting its head from one side to the other, perhaps wondering whether you're carrying breakfast. Sadly, you disappoint the bird. You are carrying absolutely nothing interesting. The robin seems mildly offended. After another curious glance, it flutters away toward another garden where, hopefully, someone more generous has already scattered grain. Ahead, smoke curls lazily from several rooftops. The village is waking faster now. One cottage after another begins breathing little ribbons of gray into the crisp morning air, which smoke mixes with the smell of damp earth, fresh straw, cold grass, and somewhere, someone is already cooking onions. You didn't realize onions could smell this inviting. Perhaps that's because breakfast is still a little while away. Hunger has an impressive imagination. As you continue walking, you notice an elderly woman sweeping the front of her cottage with a simple birch broom. She works quietly, not because she's in a hurry, because mornings have their own kind of respect. She notices you and offers a warm smile. No words, just a gentle nod. You return the gesture. In a village like this, greetings don't always require conversation. Sometimes simply acknowledging another person is enough. You continue toward the well. It sits near the middle of the village, surrounded by worn stones polished smooth by countless footsteps over generations. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of hands have pulled water from this very place. Every single morning, every single season, every single year. The old wooden bucket hanging beside the well creaks gently in the breeze. It has certainly seen better days. Then again, so has almost everyone here. A young man arrives carrying 2 empty buckets balanced across a wooden shoulder yoke. He yawns dramatically. So dramatically, in fact, that you briefly wonder whether he intends to swallow the sunrise. He catches himself halfway through the yawn and laughs quietly. "I should have gone to bed earlier," he mutters. You suspect people have been saying exactly those words for centuries. He lowers the bucket into the darkness. The rope slides through his hands with a rough scratching sound. Far below, splash, water, cold, clear, patient. He begins pulling, slowly, hand over hand. The bucket grows heavier with every inch. Water is surprisingly determined to remain exactly where it is. Eventually, the bucket reaches the top. Tiny droplets sparkle as they spill over the rim. He fills his containers before offering you the rope. You accept with a grateful smile. The fibers feel coarse against your palms. You lower the bucket carefully. Down, down, down. The darkness inside the well swallows it completely. Then, another quiet splash. You begin pulling. The weight surprises you. It always does. Even though you know exactly what's coming. Your shoulders tighten. Your hands grip harder. Little beads of cold water splash onto your sleeves as the bucket rises. Finally, it reaches the surface. Crystal clear water reflects the faint colors of approaching dawn. For just a moment, the surface looks almost like polished glass. You fill your bucket carefully. No rushing. Spilling water simply means making another trip. Nobody enjoys unnecessary exercise before breakfast. Nearby, another villager chuckles softly. One of the younger boys has attempted to carry a bucket, clearly intended for someone twice his size. He lifts it proudly, takes exactly 3 determined steps. Then, water sloshes over the edge, directly onto his boots. He sighs. The adults smile kindly. Nobody laughs at him. Well, almost nobody. One mischievous goose nearby lets out what sounds suspiciously like a very sarcastic honk. Honestly, geese have terrible manners. The little boy sighs again. Even the goose appears pleased with itself. The morning grows brighter. Not suddenly, slowly. The eastern horizon changes from deep blue to violet, then pale silver. Clouds drift lazily above the fields like enormous pieces of wool. A rooster crows again, apparently forgetting he already announced morning 15 minutes ago. Dedication is admirable, even when unnecessary. You lift your bucket. It feels satisfyingly heavy. Cold water gently rocks from side to side with each careful step. Walking home requires patience. One careless stumble means beginning the entire journey again. Fortunately, you become surprisingly good at balancing buckets. It isn't exactly a talent that appears on modern resumes, but here, it's genuinely impressive. As you pass another cottage, delicious smells drift from the doorway. Someone has already begun cooking oat porridge. The warm scent wraps itself around the chilly air. Your stomach notices immediately. It offers a quiet reminder that your own breakfast still exists only as a pleasant future possibility. Not long now, the village grows livelier with every passing minute. Children begin emerging from cottages rubbing sleepy eyes. Dogs wander lazily between houses, hoping someone accidentally drops food. Cats pretend not to care about anyone while secretly observing absolutely everything. A blacksmith opens the heavy wooden doors of his workshop. Inside, yesterday's tools wait patiently for another day of work. The familiar ring of metal has not yet begun, but soon it will become part of the village's daily music. You glance once more toward the eastern sky. At last, the very first golden ray of sunlight slips quietly above the distant hills. It touches the rooftops, the trees, the well, and finally, your face. The cold suddenly feels a little less sharp. The world seems warmer, brighter, kinder. Morning has finally arrived. You smile to yourself. The day has only just begun. And waiting back at your little cottage, a fire, a simple breakfast, and countless ordinary moments that somehow will become unforgettable. The bucket feels heavier with every careful step, not because the water has somehow become heavier, but because your arms have finally remembered they're awake. You smile to yourself. Morning chores have a funny way of announcing themselves before breakfast ever does. The narrow village path winds gently between cottages still wrapped in the soft colors of dawn. Sunlight stretches across the grass in long golden ribbons. Every tiny drop of dew catches the light for a brief moment before disappearing forever. It feels almost unfair. Nature spends hours preparing something beautiful, only for the sun to quietly erase it within minutes. A pair of sparrows bounce across the path ahead of you. They seem deeply interested in absolutely nothing. One pecks at a pebble. The other watches with great seriousness. Apparently, this is very important sparrow business. You decide not to interrupt. As you approach your cottage, the familiar wooden fence comes into view. It's slightly crooked. Actually, it has probably been slightly crooked for the last 20 years. Straight fences require straight wood. Straight wood is surprisingly difficult to find. The little wooden gate lets out its usual sleepy squeak as you push it open. You've been meaning to fix that sound, perhaps today, or tomorrow, or sometime before the next century. Inside the yard, several chickens are already awake. One brown hen struts proudly across the ground as though she personally invented mornings. Another scratches busily through yesterday's straw. A rooster watches over them with exaggerated importance. He puffs out his feathers, lifts his head proudly, and crows once again. You glance toward him. "My friend," you think quietly, "we've noticed." He seems unconvinced. The water bucket is placed carefully beside the doorway. Not a single drop spills. A small victory. Medieval life is full of tiny victories. You step back inside the cottage. Immediately the warmth greets you. Not warm by modern standards, simply warmer than outside. The little fire you revived earlier continues burning steadily. Orange flames dance around blackened pieces of oak. The smell of smoke fills the room. It settles into your clothes, into your hair, into every wooden beam overhead. If someone from another century visited this cottage, they would probably notice the smell first. You barely notice it anymore. To you, smoke smells like home. You hang your cloak beside the door. Its damp edges slowly begin drying near the hearth. Tiny wisps of steam rise almost invisibly. Nearby sits a rough wooden table. Simple, sturdy, covered with countless tiny scratches left by years of cooking, repairing, carving, and everyday life. Each mark tells a story, although none of them seem particularly interested in explaining themselves. A clay bowl waits patiently near the fire. Beside it rests a small linen sack. You untie the cord. Inside lies coarse barley meal, not soft white flour. Nothing so luxurious. This grain still remembers the field where it grew. Tiny pieces of husk remain mixed throughout. It feels rough between your fingers. Perfectly ordinary. Perfectly valuable. You reach for the iron cooking pot hanging beside the hearth. Years of soot have darkened its outside until it seems almost black. Its handle feels cool despite the nearby flames. You pour fresh water into the pot. The surface ripples gently. Then you set it above the fire. Now, you wait. Medieval cooking contains far more waiting than recipes usually admit. The fire decides the pace. Not the cook. Tiny bubbles eventually begin collecting around the edges. Soft little whispers rise from the warming water. You slowly stir in the barley meal. The mixture clouds immediately. Round and round the wooden spoon moves. Slowly, patiently, lumps disappear one at a time. Steam begins filling the cottage. Warm, comforting, familiar. Breakfast has officially begun. The smell reminds you of countless mornings just like this one. Simple food, simple work, simple days. People often imagine medieval meals as enormous feasts. Roasted meats, fresh bread, overflowing tables. Those moments certainly happened, but mostly during celebrations. Ordinary mornings look much quieter. A bowl of barley porridge, perhaps a little onion, sometimes herbs. If fortune smiled, a splash of milk. If fortune smiled very brightly, maybe even a little honey. Today, fortune smiles politely. Nothing more. You glance toward a bundle of dried herbs hanging from one of the ceiling beams. Thyme, sage, a little savory. Their scent still lingers despite months of drying. You pinch off a few tiny leaves, crushing them gently between your fingers. Immediately the fragrance blooms. Earthy, fresh, comforting. The herbs fall into the bubbling porridge. Nothing extravagant, just enough to remind breakfast that life contains small pleasures. Behind you comes a soft, rustling sound. One of the cottage cats has finally decided to appear. She stretches dramatically. Front paws first, back paws second, tail high. Then she yawns with such commitment that you briefly worry she might swallow the entire cottage. Apparently being a medieval cat is exhausting work. She circles your boots once, twice, then sits directly beside the fire, exactly where the warmest patch of floor happens to be. An experienced professional. You stir the porridge again. It thickens slowly. The wooden spoon begins leaving gentle trails behind each movement. Almost ready. Outside, the village is fully awakened now. Axes strike with somewhere nearby. Talk, talk, talk. A blacksmith's hammer begins its steady rhythm in the distance. Clang, pause, clang. Someone laughs. A child runs across the lane. Another rooster answers yours from several cottages away. For a brief moment, it sounds as though they're arguing about whose sunrise belongs to whom. Neither appears willing to compromise. You smile. The cottage feels wonderfully alive now. Not noisy, just comfortably occupied. The fire crackles. The pot bubbles softly. The cat purrs like a tiny engine invented centuries ahead of schedule. You reach for yesterday's loaf of bread. Calling it fresh would require considerable imagination. The crust feels almost as hard as the wooden table beneath it. Still, nothing goes to waste here. You break off several small pieces. They resist bravely, eventually surrendering with a satisfying crack. Into the porridge they go, slowly softening, adding just a little more substance to the meal. A knock comes gently at the door. You open it. Standing outside is your elderly neighbor. She carries a tiny woven basket. Inside rests one small apple, wrinkled, slightly bruised, still perfectly good. I had two, she says with a smile. Now we both have one. You thank her warmly. In villages like this, generosity rarely appears in grand gestures. It arrives quietly. One apple, one handful of herbs, one bucket of borrowed water. Communities survive because neighbors remember each other. You slice the apple carefully. Thin pieces, very thin, enough for every bite to contain just a whisper of sweetness. The little slices settle into the porridge. Their scent rises with the steam. Suddenly, breakfast feels almost luxurious. You carry the warm bowl toward the table. The clay feels pleasantly hot in your hands. Outside, sunlight finally reaches the front of your cottage. Golden light spills through the tiny window. Dust dances lazily in its path. You sit, take your wooden spoon, blow gently across the surface. The first bite is warm, creamy, simple, nothing fancy, yet somehow exactly what the morning needs. There are no distractions, no rushing, no clocks, only breakfast, the fire, and another peaceful day waiting just beyond the little wooden door. For now, that is more than enough. The last spoonful of warm porridge disappears a little more slowly than the first, not because it tastes different, but because you know what comes next. Work, not hurried work, not frantic work. Simply the steady rhythm that has shaped this village for generations. You place the wooden spoon inside the empty bowl and let your hands rest for a moment beside the fading warmth of the fire. Outside, the morning has changed completely. The quiet hush before sunrise has given way to something gentle but unmistakably alive. A cart rolls somewhere along the village lane. Its wooden wheels complain loudly over every stone. Apparently medieval wheels believed silence was highly overrated. You smile. Some noises become so familiar that people stop hearing them altogether. You rise from the table. The clay bowl is rinsed with a splash of the fresh water you carried from the well earlier. Nothing is wasted. Not water, not bread, not time. You wipe the bowl with a small bundle of clean straw before placing it back on the shelf. Simple, practical, done. Your old cloak still hangs beside the hearth. It has dried enough to wear comfortably now. You slip it over your shoulders. Its familiar weight settles around you like an old friend. The cottage door opens with another sleepy creak. Outside, morning sunlight spills across the village. Golden rays slide over thatched rooftops, wooden fences, and patches of damp grass that sparkle with the last remaining drops of dew. The air is still crisp, cool enough to wake anyone fully. Even the chickens seem unusually energetic. Perhaps they drank coffee before you did. Although, considering coffee won't arrive in England for several centuries, that seems rather unlikely. The hens notice you immediately. One by one they hurry across the yard, making cheerful little clucking sounds. Or perhaps impatient little clucking sounds. It's difficult to tell with chickens. They tend to sound mildly offended even when perfectly happy. You kneel beside a small wooden storage chest tucked beneath the shelter of the roof. Inside sits a sack of grain. Not much. Enough. You scoop a handful into a small wooden bowl. The grain slips between your fingers with a soft whisper. Dry. Golden. Precious. Every seed represents countless hours spent planting, growing, harvesting, threshing, grinding. Food never simply appeared. It arrived through patience. You scatter the grain gently across the yard. Instantly, feathers fly, not dramatically, just enthusiastically. The hens rush forward with impressive determination. Tiny beaks tap rapidly against the ground. One ambitious hen somehow decides that the grain beside another chicken looks significantly more delicious than the grain directly in front of her. A brief disagreement follows. Fortunately, it lasts all of 3 seconds. Peace returns. For now, near the fence stands the old rooster. He doesn't rush. He strolls, slowly, confidently, as though he personally owns every feather in the village. He pecks once, looks around proudly, then crows again. You can't help laughing quietly. This must be at least his 5th announcement of the morning. Surely everyone has noticed the sun by now. Still, he remains committed to public service. Beyond the chicken yard comes another familiar sound, a soft "ma." The goat, of course. She has excellent timing, or perhaps excellent appetite. Possibly both. You walk toward the small wooden pen. The goat is already waiting beside the gate. Her ears twitch hopefully. Her eyes remain fixed on you. She knows exactly why you've come. Breakfast. You unlatch the gate carefully. Immediately she attempts to squeeze past you, not because she wishes to escape, simply because she assumes wherever you're going, food is probably involved. You gently guide her back inside. Nice try. She blinks innocently. Clearly, she has never considered such a thing. Inside the feed basket lies a bundle of fresh hay gathered several days ago. You pull apart a generous handful and place it inside the trough. The goat begins eating immediately, without ceremony, without hesitation. You scratch gently behind her ears. She pauses, chewing for exactly 1 second, apparently deciding whether affection deserves more attention than breakfast. Breakfast wins. Predictably, goats are wonderfully honest creatures. Nearby, a pair of ducks paddle lazily around a tiny muddy puddle that barely deserves the title of pond. They seem perfectly satisfied. One dunks its head underwater. The other watches with deep concentration, then copies exactly the same movement. You suspect ducks spend much of their lives convincing one another that every idea was original. A sudden flutter overhead catches your attention. Pigeons, half a dozen of them, circle above the cottages before settling onto a nearby roof. One immediately begins puffing out its chest in an attempt to impress another pigeon. The performance appears unsuccessful. Love, apparently, has always been complicated. Across the lane, your neighbor Thomas emerges carrying 2 wooden milk buckets. He raises a cheerful hand. Morning, morning. Not much more needs saying. He heads toward the village cows. You notice one bucket swinging slightly unevenly. The handle must be loose again. Thomas notices you looking. Still holding together, he says with a grin. Barely. You nod knowingly. Many things in the village survive through determination rather than perfection, buckets included. The smell of fresh hay drifts gently through the air, mixed with smoke, warm earth, and damp grass. It isn't a fragrance anyone would bottle and sell in a marketplace. Yet, somehow, standing here, it feels exactly right. A gentle breeze stirs the branches of a nearby oak tree. Tiny leaves shimmer in the growing sunlight. Somewhere high above, a lark begins singing. Its cheerful notes float effortlessly across the open fields beyond the village. The melody rises higher and higher until the bird itself becomes almost impossible to see. Only the song remains. You stop for a moment, simply listening. No one seems rushed. No one appears anxious. There's work to do, plenty of it, but it will still be there 5 minutes from now. The village understands something modern life often forgets. Not every moment needs to be hurried. Sometimes it is enough simply to stand beneath the morning sky and hear birds welcoming another ordinary day. A soft snort interrupts your thoughts. The old village pig has finally decided breakfast deserves immediate attention. She nudges a wooden fence impatiently. You laugh. Yes, I know. The pig never pretends to be patient. In fairness, neither would you if breakfast depended entirely on someone else remembering. You gather a small bucket filled with yesterday's vegetable scraps, wilted cabbage leaves, carrot tops, a few stale crusts of bread. Nothing fancy, everything useful. The pig greets the meal with wholehearted enthusiasm. Within seconds, every scrap disappears. She grunts happily before flopping onto her side in a sunny patch of earth. An impressive display of complete satisfaction. You almost envy her. The village grows busier now. Voices drift gently between cottages. Children laugh somewhere near the well. A blacksmith's hammer rings steadily through the cool air. Woodcutters begin splitting logs beyond the churchyard. The entire settlement seems to breathe together. Slowly, naturally, without anyone needing to tell it how. You lean against the old wooden fence for one last quiet moment. The animals are fed. The morning chores are underway. And somewhere beyond the village, the fields wait patiently. There will be seeds to check, fences to mend, tools to carry. Long hours beneath the open sky. But not just yet. For now, the simple rhythm of the village continues around you. Steady, peaceful, unhurried. And somehow, that feels like exactly the right way to begin another medieval morning. The little wooden gate closes behind you with a gentle thud. The chickens continue scratching happily. The goat has already forgotten you exist. The pig, having enjoyed an excellent breakfast, appears committed to the noble tradition of doing absolutely nothing for the next hour. You can't really blame her. If someone served you breakfast and then encouraged you to nap in the sunshine, you might make the same decision. You adjust your cloak against the cool breeze and begin walking toward the edge of the village. The narrow path winds between cottages that have stood here longer than anyone can remember. Every doorway seems to have its own personality. Some are decorated with bunches of dried herbs hanging from wooden beams. Others display bundles of onions carefully braided together. One cottage has a tiny wooden carving nailed above its door. A simple cross. Not polished, not fancy, just carefully carved by someone's patient hands many years ago. The village church bell has not rung yet. It stands quietly on the small hill overlooking the cottages, its weathered stone walls glowing softly beneath the morning sun. For now, the bell sleeps. Soon enough it will remind everyone of the passing hours. But this peaceful moment still belongs to the birds. A pair of swallows dart low across the lane. They move so quickly that your eyes almost fail to follow them. Back and forth they fly, chasing tiny insects that dance invisibly in the morning air. One swallow swoops so close that you instinctively duck. The bird, completely unimpressed by your reaction, continues its elegant flight without missing a beat. You smile. Humans often believe they are graceful. Birds rarely agree. The village slowly begins to fade behind you. The sounds of conversation become quieter. The ringing of the blacksmith's hammer grows softer. Even the enthusiastic rooster finally seems willing to take a short break from announcing the obvious. Ahead, the countryside opens like a great green blanket, stretching toward the distant hills. Fields divided by rough hedges spread across the landscape. Some hold barley, others oats. A few lie empty, resting before another planting season. Medieval farmers understood something important. Land grows tired, too. Even fields deserve a little rest. A gentle breeze rolls across the crops. The young stalks bend together like waves upon a quiet sea. Thousands of tiny leaves whisper against one another. It sounds almost like distant rain, except the sky above remains perfectly clear. The path beneath your boots has been walked by countless generations. Children, farmers, shepherds, traveling merchants, pilgrims. Every footprint disappears eventually, yet the path remains. There's something comforting about that. A small rabbit suddenly darts from beneath a hedgerow. It freezes. So, do you? For several seconds, neither of you moves. The rabbit twitches its nose, apparently deciding whether you are dangerous. After careful consideration, it concludes that breakfast elsewhere sounds like a safer idea. With 3 quick hops, it disappears into the tall grass. You continue walking. Tiny wildflowers bloom beside the path. White daisies, blue cornflowers, yellow buttercups. No one planted them. No one waters them. Still, they return every spring with quiet determination. Nature rarely waits for permission. A spider has spent the night weaving an intricate web between 2 branches. Morning dew clings to every delicate thread. The web sparkles like a necklace made of tiny diamonds. You stop to admire it. The spider waits patiently in the center, probably wondering why the giant human is staring at its front garden. You decide not to disturb its masterpiece. A little farther ahead, an elderly shepherd leans comfortably against a wooden staff while watching over a small flock of sheep. The sheep seem wonderfully unconcerned with history, or politics, or tomorrow. They focus entirely on grass, one mouthful at a time. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. The shepherd notices you approaching and raises his hand. Beautiful morning. It certainly is. He nods slowly. I've seen 60 harvests. His eyes drift toward the fields, and every sunrise still looks different. You follow his gaze. He's right. The sunlight touches each blade of grass a little differently every day. Clouds shift, wind changes, seasons turn. Nothing repeats itself exactly. Even ordinary mornings quietly become history. After wishing him a peaceful day, you continue along the winding path. The fields grow larger now, closer. You can already see other villagers scattered across the land. Some carry wooden hoes over their shoulders. Others push simple handcarts filled with tools. No one rushes. There is no whistle announcing the beginning of work. No clock demanding perfect punctuality. The sun itself decides when the day begins. You pass an old oak tree standing proudly beside the road. Its enormous branches spread wide above your head. This tree was already old when your grandparents were children, perhaps even older than the oldest story anyone in the village can remember. Its bark is thick and deeply grooved. You place one hand gently against the trunk. The wood feels cool beneath your fingertips. Solid, patient, steady. Trees measure time differently than people. To an oak, a human lifetime passes almost as quickly as a single season. A tiny squirrel races down the trunk before suddenly noticing you. It freezes. Its tail flicks nervously. It clutches an acorn with surprising determination, clearly convinced you have traveled all this way specifically to steal its breakfast. You smile reassuringly. The squirrel remains unconvinced. After another suspicious glance, it races back into the branches above. Fair enough. Trust takes time. The smell of freshly turned soil reaches you before the fields themselves. Rich, earthy, alive. Several farmers have already begun working. Wooden plows rest nearby. Simple tools lean against fence posts. Oxen wait patiently in leather harnesses, occasionally swishing their tails to discourage persistent flies. One enormous ox yawns so widely that even the birds seem impressed. You had no idea such a peaceful creature could possess such an astonishingly large mouth. A young boy walks carefully beside his father, carrying a bundle of wooden stakes almost as tall as he is. Every few steps, one slips sideways. He catches it just in time. His father pretends not to notice. Learning often requires a little room for wobbling. The boy will become stronger. The stakes will become lighter, or perhaps he'll simply grow taller. Either way, morning has only just begun. You pause at the edge of the field. Behind you, the little village rests beneath the warm spring sunlight. Thin trails of smoke continue rising from chimneys. Children's laughter drifts faintly across the open land. The church bell finally rings. One slow, gentle note. Its sound rolls across the valley like a calm wave, not demanding attention, simply reminding everyone that another beautiful day has quietly arrived. You close your eyes for just a moment, breathing in the cool country air, listening to birdsong, feeling the gentle warmth of sunlight upon your face. There will be work soon enough, but for this one peaceful moment, the world asks nothing of you except to be present. And somehow, that feels wonderfully enough. You remain standing at the edge of the field for another quiet moment. The earth stretches before you in long, uneven rows, still damp from the cool night. Tiny beads of moisture cling to the young shoots, catching the sunlight like scattered pieces of glass. The breeze carries the rich scent of fresh soil. There is something deeply comforting about that smell. It speaks of seasons, of patience, of countless mornings just like this one. You step over the low wooden fence and enter the field. Immediately, your boots sink ever so slightly into the soft ground. The earth gives way beneath each step with a gentle squish. Not enough to make walking difficult, just enough to remind you that yesterday's rain is still lingering below the surface. Nearby, an older farmer straightens his back after inspecting a row of young barley. He stretches slowly, placing both hands against his lower back. Then he lets out a satisfied sigh. Working the land builds strong muscles. It also creates very creative backaches. He notices you watching and smiles. The field always wins. You laugh softly. What do you mean? He presses one muddy boot gently into the soil. No matter how much you know, the field always teaches you something new. With that, he bends down once again, carefully brushing a few tiny weeds from around the young plants. There is no frustration in his movements, only patience. The weeds will return. Everyone knows that. So will tomorrow. Some battles are simply part of life. A pair of sturdy oxen stand quietly at the far end of the field. Their broad shoulders shine beneath the morning sun. Leather harnesses rest comfortably across their backs. Unlike horses, they seem in no particular hurry. They chew thoughtfully, blink slowly, swish their tails now and then. If calmness could be measured, oxen would probably win. A young farmer gently pats one enormous animal along its neck. Ready? The ox blinks. Another slow chew. Perhaps, eventually, the farmer chuckles. Apparently, this conversation happens every morning. The wooden plow waits nearby. Simple, heavy, built from thick oak with a small iron blade fixed underneath. Nothing about it appears elegant. Everything about it appears dependable. Generations have relied upon tools exactly like this one, not because they were perfect, because they worked. The farmer gives a gentle signal. The oxen lean forward together. The harness tightens. The wooden plow bites into the earth. Slowly, very slowly, fresh soil rolls gently aside. A long, dark line appears behind them. The smell becomes even richer now. Warm earth, tiny roots, freshly turned clay. It smells like another growing season beginning. You kneel beside one of the newly opened furrows. The soil feels cool between your fingers. Soft, crumbly, alive. A small earthworm wriggles quietly back underground after being surprised by the plow. You carefully move it away from the next pass. It has important work of its own. Even if nobody in the village fully understands just how helpful tiny creatures can be, a cheerful voice calls from behind. Mind if I borrow your hands? You turn to see Margaret, one of the neighboring farmers, carrying a heavy basket filled with seed grain. Harness tightens. The wooden plow bites into the earth. Slowly, very slowly, fresh soil rolls gently aside. A long, dark line appears behind them. The smell becomes even richer now. Warm earth, tiny roots, freshly turned clay. It smells like another growing season beginning. You kneel beside one of the newly opened furrows. The soil feels cool between your fingers. Soft, crumbly, alive. A small earthworm wriggles quietly back underground after being surprised by the plow. You carefully move it away from the next pass. It has important work of its own. Even if nobody in the village fully understands just how helpful tiny creatures can be, a cheerful voice calls from behind. Mind if I borrow your hands? You turn to see Margaret, one of the neighboring farmers, carrying a heavy basket filled with seed grain. She smiles warmly. I thought this basket was lighter when I filled it. You take one side of the basket. Immediately you realize something. It was not lighter. It was exactly as heavy as it looks. Together, you carry it toward the center of the field. Each step feels steady. Neither of you speaks much. Conversation can wait. The birds seem perfectly happy, filling the silence. A skylark sings somewhere high above. Its beautiful melody pours across the countryside. You search the sky. Nothing. The bird remains almost invisible. Only its song reveals where it is. Margaret looks upward. They always sound happier than people. You nod. They probably don't have taxes. She laughs. A clear, bright laugh that drifts gently across the field. Even several nearby farmers smile, without looking up from their work. Good humor spreads easily in places where everyone knows each other. The basket finally reaches its destination. Margaret thanks you before carefully scooping a handful of grain into her apron. She walks slowly along the furrow. One graceful swing of her arm. Tiny seeds scatter across the dark soil. Another step. Another handful. The movement looks almost like dancing. Not hurried. Not wasteful. Every handful measured by years of practice. She doesn't count the seeds. She doesn't need to. Her hands remember. You watch quietly. There is something strangely beautiful about ordinary work done well. No audience, no applause, just quiet skill earned over many seasons. Farther across the field, several children chase each other along the grassy edges where no crops have been planted. Their laughter floats through the morning air. One little girl proudly carries a tiny wooden bucket almost too large for her. She walks very carefully, concentrating with all her might. Halfway across, she trips over absolutely nothing. The bucket rolls away. Fortunately, it was empty. She bursts into laughter before anyone else can. Soon everyone nearby is smiling. Sometimes embarrassment lasts only as long as you allow it. An elderly grandmother gently dusts the girl's knees before handing back the bucket. There, good as new. The girl nods seriously, then immediately runs off again, apparently fully repaired. The sun climbs higher now. Its warmth slowly chases away the last traces of morning chill. Your cloak suddenly feels a little heavier. You loosen it around your shoulders. A light breeze continues sweeping across the open countryside. Every field ripples gently beneath the wind. Thousands upon thousands of green stalks move together like waves rolling across a peaceful sea. It is impossible to watch without feeling calm. Nearby, someone begins quietly humming an old village tune while repairing a broken fence post. No words, just a gentle melody. Soon another farmer joins in, then another. Nobody planned it. The music simply grows naturally, soft enough that the birds never stop singing, strong enough that everyone can hear it. You find yourself smiling again. There are no performers here, no audience, only neighbors sharing another ordinary morning beneath the wide spring sky. A cloud drifts slowly across the sun. For a few peaceful moments, the light softens. The fields become cooler. The shadows stretch gently across the ground. Then, just as quietly, the cloud continues on its journey. The sunshine returns. Nothing dramatic. Simply another small change in a day filled with them. You glance back toward the village. The cottages now appear smaller from this distance. Thin columns of smoke still rise lazily into the blue sky. The church bell rings once more. Not to hurry anyone, only to remind the village that morning is quietly slipping toward midday. There is still plenty of work ahead, but there is no reason to rush. The wheat will not grow faster because you worry. The sun will not shine longer because you hurry. Some lessons are easier to understand in a medieval field than anywhere else. You take one long, slow breath. The air smells of fresh grass, warm earth, and spring itself. For one peaceful moment, nothing exists except birdsong, gentle wind, and the quiet rhythm of people working together beneath an endless sky. And somehow, that is more than enough. The morning has slipped by so gently that you hardly notice the passing of time. The sun now hangs a little higher above the fields, spreading a soft golden warmth across the countryside. The cool air that greeted you before sunrise has almost completely disappeared. Instead, a pleasant breeze drifts across the open land, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers and freshly turned soil. The work slows, not because everything is finished, because every pair of hands deserves a few peaceful moments. The older farmers understand this better than anyone. Working without rest is much like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Eventually, everything begins to disappear. Thomas wipes the back of his forehead with the sleeve of his linen tunic. I think the sun has finally remembered its spring. You chuckle. It certainly took its time. A few nearby farmers laugh softly. Nobody rushes toward home. Instead, everyone naturally drifts toward the enormous oak tree standing at the edge of the fields. Its branches spread so wide that they cast a circle of cool shade large enough for half the village. The tree has been standing here for generations. Children have climbed its branches. Lovers have carved their initials into its bark. Travelers have rested beneath its leaves. Old men have shared stories beneath its shade. And now, it quietly welcomes you as well. You settle onto the cool grass beneath its branches. The ground feels soft after the morning's work. Tiny white daisies grow around the thick roots, untouched by plows and wagon wheels. Above your head, sunlight filters through thousands of green leaves. Little patches of light dance gently across the ground as the breeze moves the branches. It feels almost like watching sunlight float on water. The village baker arrives carrying a woven basket covered with a clean linen cloth. The moment he lifts the cloth, a wonderful smell fills the air. Fresh bread, warm, nutty, comforting. Every conversation pauses for just a second. Even the birds seem slightly interested. Fresh bread has that effect on almost everyone. The baker smiles knowingly. I baked a little extra this morning. No one argues with such excellent decision-making. Small pieces are passed from hand to hand. Nobody takes too much. Nobody counts. Everyone simply trusts that there will be enough. And somehow, there always seems to be. You break your piece in half. The crust crackles softly. The inside is warm and tender. Simple barley bread. Nothing fancy. Yet after morning in the fields, it tastes better than almost any feast could. Margaret unwraps a small piece of white cheese from a cloth tucked inside her basket. She slices it into tiny portions, so everyone gets a taste. The slices are almost impossibly thin. Still, each one feels generous. You place a little cheese upon the warm bread. The combination is wonderfully satisfying. Nearby, someone passes around a small clay jug filled with cool spring water. No one drinks quickly. There is no need. The day is still young. As people eat, conversations drift lazily from one topic to another. Someone mentions that a fox was seen near the chicken coops last evening. Immediately, everyone begins offering advice. Build the fence higher. No. Lock the chickens earlier. No. An elderly woman smiles. You simply need smarter chickens. Laughter spreads beneath the old oak. Even she laughs at her own joke. Everyone silently agrees that smarter chickens may be asking a little too much. A tiny boy wanders nearby carrying a stick almost twice his height. He plants it proudly into the ground. This is my spear. His older sister raises one eyebrow. It looks like a branch. He thinks carefully. It is a very dangerous branch. No one disagrees. After all, imagination deserves encouragement. The children soon invent an elaborate adventure involving dragons hiding somewhere beyond the wheat fields. Fortunately for the wheat, the dragons appear to be sleeping. A gentle breeze stirs again. Leaves whisper softly overhead. One by one, tiny acorns from last autumn tumble from hidden places among the branches. A squirrel immediately appears from nowhere. It rushes toward one fallen acorn, stops, looks at everyone beneath the tree, then quickly grabs its prize before racing back up the trunk. Apparently, breakfast theft is a very real concern in the squirrel community. Thomas watches it disappear. I think that little fellow distrusts all of us. You nod thoughtfully. Probably wise. The group chuckles quietly. For a while, no one speaks. There is no awkward silence, only peaceful silence. The kind share between people who don't feel the need to fill every moment with words. The breeze continues drifting through the leaves. Bees hum gently among nearby wildflowers. A butterfly lands briefly upon a yellow blossom before floating away again. The clouds move slowly across the brilliant blue sky. Without clocks, time feels different here. Not slower exactly. Simply less important. The sun decides a rhythm. The seasons decide the calendar. Nature keeps perfect time without ever looking hurried. An elderly farmer leans comfortably against a great oak's trunk. His eyes remain closed. Not asleep, simply listening. After several peaceful minutes, he opens one eye. You know, everyone glances toward him. I've sat beneath this tree every spring for nearly 50 years. He smiles gently, and it has never once complained about the weather. A ripple of laughter spreads through the group. I suppose trees have learned patience. So should we. His words settle quietly among everyone. No one argues, because deep down, everyone knows he's right. You lean back against the rough bark of the ancient oak. The trunk feels solid and reassuring against your shoulders. Far above, leaves shimmer softly in the sunlight. Somewhere beyond the fields, a skylark begins singing once more. Its beautiful melody drifts over countryside like a gentle lullaby. You close your eyes for just a moment, breathing in the scent of fresh grass, warm bread, with smoke drifting faintly from the distant village, and the rich earth beneath your feet. Nothing extraordinary is happening. No great battle. No royal procession. No famous historical event. Just ordinary people sharing ordinary bread beneath an ordinary tree on an ordinary spring morning. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this moment so beautiful. For history is not only written by kings and queens, it is also written quietly in peaceful mornings like this one. The last crumbs of bread disappear, and the peaceful gathering beneath the old oak slowly begins to dissolve. No one announces that the break is over. No bell rings. No foreman calls everyone back to work. Instead, people simply stand when they are ready. One stretches tired shoulders. Another brushes blades of grass from a wool tunic. Someone else quietly folds the empty linen cloth that had wrapped the morning's bread. The rhythm of the village never needs instructions. Everyone seems to know it by heart. You rise slowly, taking one last glance up through the branches of the ancient oak. The leaves continue dancing softly in the warm breeze. A robin lands on one of the lower branches, tilting its head as though inspecting the little gathering below. Finding nothing particularly exciting, it lets out a cheerful song before fluttering away. Perhaps even robins enjoy a little lunchtime music. The path leading back toward the village looks different now. Only a few hours ago it had been covered with silver dew. Now the sun has dried the grass, leaving behind the earthy fragrance of warm soil and wild herbs. The countryside feels brighter, more awake, yet somehow just as peaceful. You begin walking beside Thomas. Neither of you seems interested in hurrying. The fields will still be there tomorrow, and the day after that. Thomas carries a small bundle of wooden stakes over one shoulder. They always seem lighter on the way here, he says. You glance at the bundle. I think they grow heavier whenever someone starts carrying them. Thomas nods thoughtfully. I've suspected that for years. You both laugh quietly. Sometimes the simplest conversations are the most satisfying. Ahead, the village slowly comes back into view. The little stone church stands proudly above the cottages, its weathered walls glowing warmly beneath the midday sun. Thin ribbons of smoke still drift lazily from several chimneys. Someone is preparing the midday meal. The smell reaches you long before the houses do. Fresh vegetable stew, boiling onions, perhaps a little cabbage, maybe even beans. Nothing extravagant, yet after a morning outdoors, it smells absolutely wonderful. Your stomach notices immediately. Apparently, it has recovered remarkably quickly from breakfast. As you enter the first lane, life surrounds you once again. A woman kneels beside her doorway, carefully hanging freshly washed linen across a rope stretched between two wooden posts. The cloth moves gently in the breeze like little white sails. Nearby, two young sisters are attempting to chase a flock of stubborn geese away from the vegetable garden. The geese, naturally, refuse to cooperate. One particularly confident goose stands perfectly still in the middle of the path. It stares directly at the girls. The girls stare back. The goose wins. Eventually, the sisters walk around instead. You smile. Some battles simply aren't worth fighting. A black and white cat stretches lazily across a warm stone wall. One eye opens as you pass. The other remains firmly closed. The cat has clearly decided that observing the village requires only 50% effort today. You almost admire its commitment to relaxation. A familiar sound echoes from farther down the lane. Clang, clang, clang. The blacksmith is hard at work. Each steady strike of the hammer rings clearly through the village. You wander toward the open workshop. Inside, the air feels warmer than outside. The forge glows a brilliant orange, and tiny sparks leap upward each time the hammer meets hot iron. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his forehead before lifting another glowing piece of metal with long iron tongs. He notices you watching. Careful, he grins. If you stand much closer, you'll leave here as a horseshoe. You laugh. I'll stay right here then. A wise decision. With another powerful swing, his hammer lands perfectly upon the heated iron. The metal bends slightly, not through force alone, but through careful patience. Each strike serves a purpose. Too hard and the iron could crack. Too soft and nothing changes. There seems to be a lesson hidden somewhere inside that. You thank him and continue along the lane. Across the street, another craftsman sits beneath a small wooden shelter. A wheel rests upside down before him. One spoke is broken. With slow, practiced movements, he removes a damaged piece and carefully shapes a new one from ash wood. His knife glides smoothly through the timber. Thin curls of pale would fall gently onto the ground. The smell of fresh cut wood drifts into the warm air. It reminds you of the forest after rain. The craftsman hums quietly to himself. He doesn't appear rushed. A wheel repaired well today will still be rolling years from now. That is worth taking time over. Further along, you hear another pleasant rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack. A weaver sits inside the doorway of a small cottage, working at a large wooden loom. Bright threads stretch tightly across its frame. With every movement of her hands, another row of cloth slowly appears. The pattern grows almost magically. Blue will cross his cream-colored thread. Again and again, the steady sound of the loom feels strangely soothing, like the ticking of a very old clock. Except this clock measures patience rather than minutes. The weaver smiles without stopping her work. Making a blanket? You ask. For winter, she replies. She laughs softly. I know it's spring, but winter always arrives faster than people expect. You nod. That seems to be true in every century. Outside the cottage, bundles of freshly gathered lavender hang beneath the roof to dry. The breeze carries their gentle fragrance through the lane. For a few moments, the whole village smells wonderfully peaceful. Children continue playing nearby. Today, their dangerous branch has somehow become an entire fleet of imaginary ships. The smallest boy proudly announces himself as captain. His older sister immediately declares herself queen of the sea. No one seems interested in historical accuracy. Fortunately, imagination has never required permission. A little farther along, an elderly woman sits comfortably on a wooden bench spinning wool into yarn. The spinning wheel turns with a soft, steady hum, round and round. Again and again, her hands move almost without thought. Years of practice have made every motion effortless. She looks up as you pass. Beautiful day. It certainly is. She smiles toward the blue sky. We must enjoy these quiet ones. Her words linger in your thoughts as you continue walking. Because she is right. The quiet days are often forgotten. History books rarely mention them. They tell stories of battles, kings, queens, great victories, great disasters. But most people, most days, were simply ordinary. Someone baked bread. Someone repaired a cart. Someone fed the chickens. Someone sat beneath a tree listening to birds sing. Those quiet moments built the world just as surely as any famous event. You slow your pace. The village feels wonderfully alive. Not busy, not noisy. Simply lived in. A place where every cottage holds a story. Every path remembers footsteps. Every morning begins with hope. And every evening ends beside a warm fire. You take one deep breath. The scent of fresh bread, with smoke, lavender, and warm timber fills the air. The church bell rings softly once again. Not to hurry you, only to remind the village that another peaceful day is quietly unfolding. And you continue your slow walk, letting the calm rhythm of medieval life carry you gently forward. Leaving the village lane behind, you find your feet carrying you toward the little cottage once again. There is no urgency. There rarely is. The afternoon sun hangs comfortably above the rooftops, bathing everything in a warm golden light that softens every rough edge of the old village. Your shadow stretches lazily across the dirt path. A gentle breeze follows you home, carrying the cheerful chatter of swallows darting overhead. They swoop effortlessly between rooftops, catching tiny insects invisible to everyone except themselves. Watching them almost makes flying seem easy. Almost. The little wooden gate welcomes you with its familiar squeak. You smile. Perhaps it isn't really squeaking. Perhaps it's simply saying hello. The chickens certainly believe you've returned for them. The moment they see you, they hurry across the yard with determined little steps. One ambitious hen rushes so quickly that she trips over a small stone. She quickly regains her balance, then looks around to make sure nobody noticed. Fortunately, only you saw, and you're kind enough to keep her secret. The cottage garden sits quietly beside the fence. It isn't large, not even close. Every patch of soil has been carefully used. Small rows of onions stand proudly beside neat lines of cabbage. Carrots hide beneath feathery green leaves. Parsley, sage, and thyme grow together near the kitchen door, filling the air with their gentle fragrance whenever the wind passes through. This tiny garden feeds the family through much of the year. Every plant matters. Every harvest counts. You kneel beside the herbs. The earth still feels cool beneath the surface. Tiny drops of moisture cling to the leaves where the morning dew lingered in the shade. Running your fingers lightly across the thyme releases a fresh, earthy scent. It fills the warm afternoon air. For a brief moment, you simply breathe. Some perfumes come from distant kingdoms. This one comes from your own garden. A buzzing sound drifts nearby. a honeybee, then another. Soon you notice dozens of them moving patiently from flower to flower. None appear hurried. Each bee seems completely focused on its own tiny task. You watch one disappear into the center of a bright purple blossom before emerging moments later dusted with golden pollen. It almost looks proud of itself. Nearby, a bright red ladybird slowly climbs the stem of a cabbage leaf. Step by tiny step, it pauses occasionally, perhaps to admire the view, or perhaps tiny insects simply enjoy making humans wait. Either explanation seems reasonable. You reach for a small wooden watering bucket, standing beside the rain barrel. The recent showers have left plenty of fresh water collected beneath the roof. You lift the bucket. Thankfully, water carried only a few steps feels much lighter than water carried all the way from the village well. That alone feels like an excellent afternoon surprise. Moving carefully between the rows, you pour small amounts around the roots of the younger plants. Not too much, just enough. Gardening seems to reward patience more than strength. You can't force vegetables to grow. You simply give them what they need, then trust the seasons. A butterfly drifts lazily through the garden. Its wings are bright orange with tiny black markings. It settles briefly upon a flowering herb, then lifts into the air once more, floating rather than flying. You find yourself wondering whether butterflies ever know where they're going, or whether they simply enjoy the journey. Either way, they always appear surprisingly relaxed. A familiar voice calls from beyond the fence. "Good afternoon." You turn to see your neighbor Eleanor, carrying a woven basket balanced comfortably against her hip. Inside are freshly picked peas. Their bright green pods overflow the basket. She smiles warmly. "My garden decided to be generous today." She reaches inside and offers you a handful. You thank her with genuine appreciation. In return, you gather several sprigs of fresh thyme and a few onions from your own garden. She accepts them with a grateful smile. No money changes hands. It doesn't need to. In small villages, kindness often travels back and forth like this. One day you give, another day you receive. The balance quietly takes care of itself. Eleanor glances toward your rows of carrots. "They're growing well. I think they're trying." She laughs softly. "Let's hope the rabbits don't think so, too." You both glance toward the nearby hedgerow. As if perfectly on cue, a pair of rabbit ears appears briefly above the tall grass. The rabbit freezes, apparently realizing it has been noticed, then disappears again. The garden remains safe. For now, you continue tending the plants, pulling away tiny weeds growing between the vegetables. The weeds come out easily after the recent rain, one by one, slowly. There is something almost peaceful about such a simple task. No complicated decisions, no rushing, just careful hands and quiet thoughts. The afternoon sun warms your back, while birds continue singing from the nearby trees. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker echoes through the forest. Talk, talk, talk. It sounds almost like someone gently knocking on an old wooden door. A dragonfly suddenly darts across the garden. Its transparent wings sparkle in the sunlight like tiny pieces of glass. It hovers for a moment above the rain barrel before vanishing as quickly as it arrived. Nature seems full of visitors today. Even the old cottage cat decides to inspect your work. She strolls slowly between the rows of vegetables with all the confidence of someone who clearly believes the entire garden belongs to her. She pauses beside the onions, sniffs one carefully, appears unimpressed, then curls into a sunny patch of soft earth and immediately falls asleep. An admirable level of commitment to afternoon relaxation. You lean against a wooden fence for a moment, looking across the little garden. Nothing here is grand. Nothing here is famous. Yet everything has purpose. Every onion, every herb, every tiny green shoot pushing bravely through the soil. Together they represent weeks of care and months of hope. You think about how many gardens like this must exist across the kingdom. Thousands, perhaps millions. Each one quietly feeding a family. Each one tended by hands much like yours. History often remembers castles, but villages survive because of gardens. A gentle wind stirs once again. The herbs sway softly. The leaves whisper together. The scent of thyme, fresh soil, and warm sunshine fills the afternoon. For one peaceful moment, there is nowhere else you would rather be. The garden asks nothing of you except patience. And perhaps that is one of its greatest gifts. The little garden grows quiet behind you. The herbs continue dancing gently in the breeze, and the cottage cat remains asleep, entirely unconcerned with the passing of time. You set the empty watering bucket beside the rain barrel and brush the loose soil from your hands. The sun has climbed almost to its highest point. Its warmth settles comfortably across the village. Not too hot, not too cool. One of those rare afternoons that seems determined to make everyone walk a little slower. You remember that the small water jug inside the cottage is nearly empty. Not completely empty. Just empty enough that your future self would appreciate another trip to the village well. And so, with an easy smile, you lift the wooden bucket once more. It feels wonderfully light. For now, the familiar lane stretches ahead, warm beneath your boots. The puddles left by yesterday's rain have almost disappeared, leaving only dark patches in the earth that hint at where they once rested. A gentle breeze carries the smell of drying hay from the nearby fields. Somewhere farther away, someone has begun baking another batch of bread. You quietly wonder if bakers realize they make entire villages hungry simply by doing their jobs. As you pass the old oak near the center of the village, you notice 3 elderly men sitting beneath its shade. None of them appears to be doing very much. One slowly whittles a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. Another absent-mindedly watches clouds drift across the sky. The third has somehow fallen asleep while sitting perfectly upright. It is an impressive skill. You almost applaud. One of the awake gentlemen notices you. Heading to the well? You lift the bucket slightly. It appears so. He nods with complete seriousness. The water should still be there. You pause for just a moment. I was hoping so. The corners of his mouth lift into a quiet smile. Even 800 years ago, people appreciated wonderfully terrible jokes. The village well stands just where you left it this morning. Solid, patient, unchanging. The stone around its edge has grown smooth after centuries of countless hands resting upon it. Children have leaned over it. Travelers have refreshed themselves beside it. Families have gathered here every day of their lives. The well remembers everyone. A young mother stands nearby filling 2 clay jugs while her little daughter sits on a low stone wall swinging her legs. The child watches the bucket disappear into the darkness below with wide eyes. "How deep is it?" she asks. Her mother smiles. "Deep enough to keep the water cool." The little girl considers this carefully. "So, very deep." The mother laughs softly. "I suppose that's one way to describe it." The child seems satisfied. Some questions don't need exact answers. They simply need comforting ones. You wait patiently while they finish. There is no cue, no impatience, no checking the time every 30 seconds. Everyone simply understands that water arrives one bucket at a time. Eventually, your turn comes. The rope feels rough beneath your palms, just as it did this morning. You lower the bucket slowly. The wooden handle creaks gently. Down, down, down. Then, a familiar splash echoes upward from the darkness. The sound seems somehow cooler than the warm afternoon air above. You begin pulling, hand over hand. The bucket grows heavier with every movement. Water has not become any lighter since sunrise. It remains wonderfully consistent. Your arms notice. The bucket finally reaches the top. Crystal clear water sparkles in the bright sunlight. Tiny droplets run down its sides before disappearing onto the ancient stones. You fill your own bucket carefully. Nearby, 2 little boys have discovered a particularly fascinating beetle, making its determined way across the edge of the well. One kneels close. Where do you think he's going? The other thinks very seriously. Probably home. But what if he already left home? An excellent question. One that neither boy seems able to answer. The beetle, meanwhile, continues walking without offering any explanation whatsoever. Perhaps some journeys are best kept secret. A swallow swoops low across the well, barely touching the surface of the water with one wing, before climbing gracefully back into the sky. The little girl gasps with delight. It almost flew into the well. Her mother smiles. It knew exactly where it was going. Birds often seem to. You lift the now full bucket. Cool drops splash gently onto your boots. The water rocks from side to side with each careful step. Walking home requires steady hands and a little patience. Fortunately, you have practiced both today. As you leave the well, you notice the village cooper working outside his small workshop. Wooden barrels of every size stand neatly arranged beside him. Some are tall enough to reach your waist. Others are no bigger than a loaf of bread. He carefully fits a new iron hoop around one barrel. Using a small wooden mallet, he taps it into place. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike is gentle, precise, patient. You stop to watch. Without looking up, he says, "Too hard," and the wood splits. Another careful tap. Too soft. Tap, and the barrel leaks. He finally looks toward you with a smile. Life's rather similar. You nod thoughtfully. It often is. The cooper returns to his work, humming quietly beneath his breath. The village itself seems to hum along with him. Somewhere, a spinning will turn steadily. A baby laughs. A dog barks exactly once before deciding that was probably enough barking for the day. The blacksmith's hammer continues its slow, dependable rhythm. None of the sounds compete with one another. Together, they create something almost musical, the music of ordinary life. You continue walking toward your little cottage. The bucket feels heavier now, not unpleasantly heavy, simply honest. Every step reminds you that even the simplest comforts require a little effort. Fresh water, warm bread, a roof overhead. None arrive by accident. A gentle wind stirs a lavender hanging beneath a nearby window. Its fragrance drifts across the lane, mixing with smoke and warm sunshine. For a brief moment, you close your eyes, breathing deeply, listening, feeling. The village asks for hard work, but it also gives something precious in return. Quiet, community, purpose, simple moments that ask nothing more than your attention. You open your eyes once again. Your cottage waits only a few steps ahead. The afternoon is far from over. There will still be small chores to finish, perhaps a little mending, perhaps gathering firewood before evening. Nothing hurried, nothing overwhelming. Just another peaceful chapter in a day that seems perfectly content to unfold one gentle moment at a time. You set the bucket of fresh water inside the cottage, placing it carefully beside the stone hearth. The cool water catches a beam of afternoon sunlight spilling through the tiny window. For a moment, the surface shimmers like polished silver. The fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers. It no longer crackles loudly. Instead, it breathes quietly, sending gentle waves of warmth through the little room. The cottage feels peaceful, comfortable, safe. You could easily remain inside for the rest of the afternoon. The wooden stool beside the fire looks particularly inviting. So does the sleepy cat curled into a perfect circle nearby. She opens one eye, looks at you, then closes it again. Clearly, she believes you've already accomplished enough work for one day. It is a tempting opinion. Unfortunately, the firewood stack beside the hearth tells a different story. You glance toward the pile. Several logs remain. Not many. Enough for tonight. Perhaps, but certainly not enough for tomorrow. Medieval life has a simple rule. When you think you have enough firewood, gather a little more. The weather has a remarkable talent for changing its mind. You lift a small woven rope basket hanging beside the door. Its handle is smooth from years of use. Generations of hands have carried this same basket into the woods. You slip a small hatchet through the loop on your belt, not for chopping down mighty oak trees, only for trimming fallen branches into pieces small enough to carry home. The cottage door swings open. Warm sunlight greets you once again. The village feels wonderfully calm. Many of the afternoon chores have settled into their slow, steady rhythm. A woman hums softly while spinning wool outside her doorway. Two children carefully stack smooth stones beside a garden wall. Neither tower appears especially stable. Both children seem enormously proud of them anyway. As you walk toward the edge of the village, the familiar sounds slowly begin to fade. The blacksmith's hammer grows quieter. The cheerful conversations drift behind you. Soon, only birdsong remains. The The narrow path leading toward the forest winds gently between open meadows. Wildflowers sway lazily on either side. Buttercups, bluebells, tiny white clover blossoms. Bees wander happily among them, carrying out their endless work without the slightest complaint. You wonder if bees ever take holidays. Probably not, although if anyone has earned one, it must surely be them. A gentle breeze brushes across the tall grass. The entire meadow bends together like a soft green wave. Grasshoppers leap from one blade to another as you pass. Each tiny jump seems impossibly high for such a small creature. Nature is full of surprising athletes. The forest appears gradually, not as a dark, mysterious wall, but as a welcoming collection of old trees standing patiently together. Tall oaks, graceful ash trees, silver birches with pale bark glowing softly in the afternoon light. Their leaves whisper gently overhead, almost as though the forest is quietly greeting everyone who enters. You step beneath the branches. Immediately, the air becomes cooler. The sunlight changes too. Instead of shining directly upon the ground, it filters through thousands of green leaves above. Little patches of golden light dance across the forest floor. Everything feels calmer here, slower. The ground beneath your boots is soft with fallen leaves from previous seasons. Each step makes only the gentlest sound. A squirrel darts up the trunk of a nearby oak, clutching something that looks suspiciously like half a hazelnut. It pauses halfway up, looks directly at you, then disappears behind the tree, apparently deciding that sharing lunch is entirely out of the question. Fair enough. Lunch is important. The scent of the forest surrounds you. Damp earth, fresh moss, tree bark warmed gently by the sun, and somewhere nearby, wild mint. Its cool fragrance drifts softly through the air. You breathe deeply. Modern life has many wonderful inventions, but few things compare to the peaceful smell of an old woodland after spring rain. A woodpecker taps steadily somewhere in the distance. Talk, talk, talk. The rhythm echoes gently through the trees. High above, sunlight catches tiny spider webs stretched between thin branches. They sparkle almost invisibly, entire little worlds hidden among the leaves. You begin looking for fallen branches, not living trees. There is no need. The forest is generous enough. Storms and winter winds have already provided everything required. Soon you discover a long oak branch resting beneath a cluster of ferns. Dry, solid, perfect. You kneel beside it. The wood snaps cleanly into shorter pieces with satisfying crack. The smaller branches break easily. The thicker ones need a little help from a hatchet. Nothing hurried. One careful strike. Then another. Soon several neat bundles lie ready. You stack them inside the basket. Not too many. Better to make 2 comfortable trips than one exhausting one. An elderly man appears farther along the path, carrying a bundle of sticks tied neatly with rope. He smiles as he approaches. Good afternoon. And to you. He glances toward your basket. The forest has been generous. It certainly has. He nods thoughtfully. My father always said. He adjusts the bundle on his shoulder. Take only what you need today. Leave enough for tomorrow, and leave enough for someone else. You look around at the quiet woodland. The advice seems perfectly suited to this peaceful place. I think your father was a wise man. The old fellow smiles. He'd be pleased to hear that. With a friendly wave, he continues along the winding path until the trees quietly hide him from view. You return to gathering small branches. Nearby, a family of rabbits emerges cautiously from beneath a patch of brambles. 3 tiny kits hop clumsily behind their mother. They stop, nibble fresh clover, then continue exploring the woodland as though every fallen leaf hides a wonderful new adventure. One curious little rabbit stands on its hind legs to examine you. Its ears twitch. Its nose wiggles rapidly. After a few thoughtful seconds, it decides you are far too large to be interesting. With one cheerful hop, it follows the others into the undergrowth. A soft breeze stirs the treetops once more. Thousands of leaves rustle together. The sound is gentle, almost like waves rolling onto a distant shore. You lean against the rough trunk of an old oak for a moment. The basket beside you is nearly full now, not overflowing. Just enough. The afternoon sun slips between the branches, painting long golden stripes across the woodland floor. Everything feels wonderfully still, wonderfully unhurried. The forest has given you firewood, fresh air, quiet company, and a few peaceful moments shared with birds, squirrels, and rabbits. You lift the basket once again. It feels satisfyingly heavy, not burdensome, simply honest. A reminder that warmth during the evening begins with small tasks completed during the day. You turn toward the village. The winding woodland path waits patiently ahead. Home is not far now, and somewhere beyond the trees, a tiny cottage, a glowing hearth, and another peaceful chapter of your medieval day.